Hi, this is Corey Johnston, and today's lesson is going to take place in the 72nd chapter in the book of Psalms. This psalm represents the capstone of the second book of Psalms. There are a total of 5 books in the 150 chapters. This second book ranges from the 42nd all the way to the 72nd. And a lot of people mistakenly think that Solomon is the author of this psalm. It is actually written to him. And when we read the first verse, it's going to make sense as a psalm of David. So Solomon was a philosopher and a scholar and a peacemaker, whereas David was a warrior and a musician. So Solomon wrote the Proverbs. David wrote more psalms than any other. 73 are attributed to him. But he did write this to his son Solomon in mind, and this can be classified. There are the whole spectrum of human emotions, and there's this whole, all these types of themes, thematic classifications, which we can classify certain psalms. This is a messianic one. That means that it points to or alludes to the Messiah to come. And the golden age of Solomon was very much a portend to the golden age, capital TAG, of the millennial rule, and it was but a shadow of its reflection, but it was meant to point to and allude to it. And so Solomon lay much of the hopes of the future of the Hebrew people and the Israelite nation. And for the better part of his reign, he ruled in what can be qualified as a golden age of peace and prosperity. But towards the end of his life, that's a whole different story, but he succumbed to idolatry, and as a consequence of his rebellion, his life was cut short, and not long after his passing, the United Kingdom of Israel was divided permanently. But the title of this psalm, now the title marks the beginning of the inspired words, because everything recorded from in the beginning in Genesis 1:1 all the way to Revelation 22:19 or whatever is inspired. That includes the titles of these psalms. So it's to Solomon. It's not of Solomon. It's not by Solomon. Usually of translates as by. So in the 70th chapter, for instance, we read to the chief singer of David to bring remembrance. So of David, that means by David, but here it is to Solomon, much as the 70th one is given by the mouth of or by the hand of David to the mouth of the chief singer. This is a letter to, or this is a lot of his hopes and expectations for his son. O Elohim, give the king your justice and your righteousness to the son of a king. So the son of the king makes sense as Solomon. This is David praying to Elohim. He's asking him to give the king his justice, because his own sense of justice was flawed and unreliable. Man judges by the outward appearance, but Yahweh looks in the heart, so his justice is his model of justice, and his standards of justice are to be our standards of justice. And his standards of justice were reflected in the Mosaic Law. They weren't always obeyed and enforced, but on David we had a man who was genuinely concerned and devoted to living as a man after his Maker's own heart, and he wanted righteousness to be given to his son and his successor. Solomon was that son, and the righteousness, when it rains on the throne, it will rain righteousness from heaven and replenish the earth, as we eventually read. Let him rule your people with righteousness, and your poor with justice. So righteousness is the quality which marks the ideal rule. We want leaders and rulers of righteousness, and the moral corruption in Washington, D.C. is staggering in our present situation, but there is such a thing. There are rare moments in history where rulership was combined with righteousness. I believe that was the case certainly at the founding of our period, and sporadically in between, but not right now. But to give justice to the poor. Now, because man, as his own judge, they're going to gravitate and be biased towards the rich in an impartial judgment. But Yahweh, none of that stuff matters to him. So we who enforce and administer justice on his behalf must have his welfare and his concern in his mind for the poor, that they see that they are not exploited and taken advantage of just because they are vulnerable. They are in every way equally meriting of justice, as are the rich by the same token. Let the mountains bring peace to the people, and the hills by righteousness. So mountains are a sign and symbol and a representative of eternality, and the peace that he wants to bring to the people is by connection and eternal peace. And Solomon's name is derived from the Hebrew word shalom, which means peace, but also more than peace. It also means prosperity and inner serenity. So that's he brought peace and prosperity to his kingdom, and he ruled in righteousness for the greater part of his reign. He asked a righteous request for the wisdom, and then we witness him use that wisdom to administer justice to a woman who killed her own daughter and tried to steal another woman's son in the famous court case we read of in 1 Kings, the 3rd chapter. Let him rightly rule the poor of the people, save the children of the needy, and crush the oppressor. So this is the reality of justice, but the world's sense of justice is perverted and corrupted. So the vulnerable are the ones who are crushed, not the oppressor. But at the final day and age, when we must stand and be reckoned for him, if we oppressed and crushed and fleeced others, then we will be oppressed and crushed and fleeced eternally. So the needy and the poor, these are vulnerable. These are people bereft of human or financial resources, but a king intervening on their behalf, or even a judge working at the behest or on the behalf of that king, could make a difference in their life, because left to their own devices, the rich would exploit them and oppress them. But that was the equilibrium of and balance of justice was reflected in the Mosaic law. It wasn't always executed, but Solomon and David certainly did, to the best of their abilities. Let them fear you before the sun and before the moon in all generations. So he's still talking to Yahweh. He's praying to him. He's addressed it to Elohim, but it is given to his son, even though he is speaking to Yahweh. So the word you is capitalized in this. So he's asked, let them fear God above and beyond the sun and before the moon and all the celestial generations. He doesn't want just this generation to do it. He wants all generations to do it. In all generations, every single one of them. So he wants to keep the torch lit from his generation to ours, and we are indebted to this 3,000-year-old piece of poetry which uplifts us in our present time and gives us the same blessed hope for the kingdom which is yet to come, and the king who shall return, with the kingdom following after, because where a king goes, so goes his kingdom. Let him come down like rain upon the mown grass, like showers watering the earth. So it's going to rain righteousness when righteousness reigns on the throne. Slight play of words. They are similarly sounded but spelled differently. But when it rains righteousness, it will replenish the earth as the rain does to the sky. That will replenish the balance and stability of a just and flourishingly righteous society. And showers in abundance. It takes not just a sprinkle, but a shower to water the earth and replenish it. So it's going to exude righteousness like rain from the heaven, not just a sprinkle here and there, not seasonal sight, but enough to rain and replenish the earth. Let the righteous flourish in his days with plenty of peace, till the moon is no more. So till the moon is no more means forever. The moon was thought to be eternal by the ancients. It had always been there as far as they knew. So when it was no more, that would have marked the end of time itself. And of course, time it does have a beginning and it may have an end, but we will be exalted in eternity to a state of being that transcends mere time. But to return to the passage, the cause and effect, the causational effect of righteousness is peace when everyone is righteous and treating their neighbor with neighborly and brotherly love. There is peace that governs and guides your interactions with others, and you get enough of these people together that defines and forms the society. The microcosm and the macrocosm are almost always mutually reflective. And let him rule from sea to sea and from the river to the ends of the earth. So the original promise to Abraham was from the Mediterranean. That would have been the end of the earth, at least in before the West really interfered and beginning with the Greeks and then the Romans came over to Eastern civilization. But for the greater part of Israel's history, it was just Egypt to the south, really as far north as the Hittites, and then the Babylonians, Assyrians, everyone else to the west, and also the Syrians and the Phoenicians to the north. But they didn't really, the end of the earth, they would have thought themselves as the western end of the earth, because really between them and Gibraltar is just the Mediterranean Sea. But they have yet to occupy that land in its entirety from the beginning of its promise. But Solomon certainly did exercise hegemony over the region, if not rule and dominion. But let those dwelling in the desert bow before him, and his enemies lick the dust. Those dwelling in the deserts would have been the Bedouin traders of the Arabian Peninsula, which is the bulk of which is a desert, and enemies to lick the dust. That just means your enemies are totally submissive, totally surrendered, and totally submitted to you, so that gives the upper hand and the leverage to the ruler of righteousness. Let the kings of Tarshish and of the isles being present, the kings of Sheba and Seba offer gifts. So these three locations, Tarshish was past the point of the Rock of Gibraltar. It was considered the western extremity of the earth, because the Atlantic Ocean was hitherto uncrossed for at least until the Columbus, if not the Vikings. And Sheba was the place. It corresponds. It's on the Arabian Peninsula to the south and the west, so it corresponds to the modern country of Yemen. And it wasn't a king, but a queen, who we most customarily attribute that kingdom to, the Queen of Sheba, the anonymous Queen of Sheba, who visited Solomon with all of her questions that were perplexing her and befuddling her, and Solomon answered them all with astonishing ease, and she came all the way to hear his wisdom, and the Savior used that as evidence of condemnation against his Pharisaical detractors who had him, the Messiah of prophecy, in their midst, walking among them in their homeland, whereas this queen traveled 1,000 miles to hear the wisdom of Solomon, and greater than Solomon was here among you. And Seba, that's an African kingdom in the modern country of Sudan. So these are triangularly located. We have, for instance, I wish I drew a map, but here's Israel, here's Tarshish, here's Sheba, and then here's Seba. So we just get that this is an extensive dominion and area of kings and peoples paying tribute to the ruler in Jerusalem. And let all kings bow down before him, all nations serve him. So he is rightly described as the King of Kings and the Master of Masters. And so he is every king on earth is a temporary steward, but the king, the sovereign, supreme, and omnipotent king, the one whose sovereign is omnipotent and omnipresent, every king on earth will bow down before him. Every nation, every person in every nation will serve him. There's coming a day when every knee will bow and every tongue will confess that he is king and master and God. And that we certainly witness that in the 11th chapter. So that day may not be today. You may not bow down your knee today, but there's coming a day when you will bow your knee. You will be forced to bow your knee. And that day when we all must stand before him and be reckoned. For he delivers the needy when he cries, and the poor who has no helper. The needy and the poor, we read there earlier in the 4th verse, the needy are the destitutes, the ones who are in need, not in mere want. So a poor person may not have any room for the luxuries, but they have a roof over their head and, enough food to survive and feed their families. But the needy are a level below the poor. These are vulnerable because poor people are one step away from being needy, and needy people are one step below being poor. So, of course, Yahweh's justice and concern reaches down to the vulnerable, oppressed, and outcasts of society, and so too must the earthly king who is charged to rule as a steward for the heavenly king must reflect his concern. He spares the poor and the needy, and he saves the lives of the needy. So he spares the poor and the needy from just being swallowed whole by their rich oppressors, because he is richer than any man in his kingdom. He is powerful to intervene and prevent any ordinary rich person from exploiting or subjugating or just enslaving any other, be it through literal slave or debt. And they have a powerful ally in him, as do the needy. And the needy, their lives are in danger. They need food to survive. They need clothes to stay warm. They need a house to live in order to have any guarantee for life. But, that's all stepped in and provided for by the He who is the Son, Yahshua Messiah. He redeems their life from oppression and from violence, and their blood is precious in his eyes. So he is our Redeemer. That is a capital R, but in this it's just redeems, but that is his title, Redeemer. He redeems our life. He is our ransom. He purchased his life, and it was by his own precious blood. That is the price we are bought with, and the price is precious, and our blood is precious in his eyes. We also read of something similar. Precious is the blood of thy saints in your eyes, I believe in Psalm 16:15. But he is our ransom from oppression and violence, which are symptomatic of sin, certainly. So he is our ransom and our redemption from sin and death and damnation and hell. And he shall live, and the gold of Sheba be given to him, and prayer be made for him continually. Let him be blessed all day long. So, because their blood is precious in his eyes, and they belong to him, and he redeems them, they shall not die, but they shall live. And once more we read of Sheba. That was a fantastically wealthy kingdom in terms of natural resources. They had gold in abundance, and Solomon would have been commercially connected to this land some 1,000 miles away, and all this would belong to those who he had redeemed, and they're going to have the guarantee and assurance of people praying for them continually, and that means an uninterrupted hotline of voice into Yahweh's own ear, and blessings will flow. So when you are praying, when you have other people praying for you, that means that you may not even know that how you're being blessed, but that is how we have people. Strangers can pray for anyone they know. Someone who is not a stranger of someone can pray in secret for anyone they know, and it's not necessary to let them know all the time all the things that they are praying for them. Sometimes it just helps to hear, I'm praying for you. Let there be plenty of grain in the earth, on the top of the mountains. Let its fruit wave like Lebanon, and those of the city flourish like grass of the earth. So there's not going to be scarcity in this kingdom, but there's going to be abundance, both material and spiritual. There's going to be more than enough grain to go around across the earth to feed everyone on it and in it. And the city will be flourishing like the grass of the earth. So it's going to be built up. It's going to be a sight to see, and it's going to come across the earth. It's going to cover and define the earth, much in the way that grass defines at least the land portion of most of the earth. Let his name be forever. Let his name continue before the sun, and let them bless themselves in him. Let all nations call him blessed. So the name is Yahweh, and strictly speaking, there is no separation from the name and the person in the Hebrew mindset. And his name, Yahweh, indicates that he is forever. It translates as I am that I am. And the word am is significant. It is an eternal particle. It is more than a present state of being. It's not I was or I became or I used to be. It is I am, and eternal. And because he is forever, so too is his name, which is an extension of himself. And his name is above in precedence and certainly significance, be above and beyond the sun. The sun is his creation, and it's not even his biggest sun in his universe. And if you bless yourselves in him, you will be blessed beyond anyone else, any other person, place, or thing you invest your blessing in, and all the nations will call him blessed. So every nation on earth will be kneeling and submitted and confessing to the rightful king, the millennial king, and the dispensation which awaits us. Blessed be Yahweh Elohim, Elohim of Israel. He alone is doing wonders. So the Yahweh is his name. That's who he is. Elohim is what he is, and who he belongs to is Israel. That doesn't mean that he only works on behalf of Israel. It means he has worked on them in a special and significant way. These are his chosen people, the apple of his eyes, the chosen for a purpose, a providential purpose, to bring the Messiah, who was the fulfillment of this Psalms allusion. It was a fulfillment to the Messiah to come, who didn't come as a king. He came as a lamb, but he's going to return as a lion, and everything we just read is going to take place under his rule perfectly and totally. But that is also his son, Yahshua. So, they're still Elohim. And blessed be his esteemed name forever, and let all the earth be filled with his esteem. Amen and amen. So his name will be blessed and esteemed, and not only that, but forever, because the name indicates from forever. It belongs to eternity, from eternity, and before time itself. And he is also omnipresent across time as well as across space. So everywhere on the earth is filled with his esteem, because he made it, and he sanctifies any given location with his presence or his intervention. And they are all filled with his esteem, past capacity to the top and overflowing. And amen, amen just indicates so be it, or an affirmation of agreement. The prayers of David, the son of Jesse, are ended. So this makes sense. The first verse and the final verse really lends salience or credence and salience to the idea that David was the author of this, even though he is not identified as such in the title. The first verse and the first verse you read, the son of a king, and it is dedicated to Solomon, not by or of him, but the prayers of David, the son of Jesse, have reached their finishing point for now. Now, in the third book of Psalms, we read much of them belong to Asaph, who is post-exilic, but David, this isn't the final thing we hear from David, but that's all the time we have for today. Thank you so much. I'm so glad you're here. Stay tuned until next time. I'll see you then. Bye bye.